Okay, hello there, and welcome to this Getting Started with Git tutorial mini-series. It's going to be split, at the moment it is planned to be split between 4 parts. So this first part is just a bit of an overview, getting you settled in there. What is Git? Something that you may have come across, but it's something that if you want to work in the development industry, software development or web development, anything like that, you are going to need to know Git or a version of Git. So what is Git? Well, Git is a version control system. So what does that mean? So it means that you will have a project on the go, and inevitably there are teams working on this one project. And what this version control system does, or what Git does, is it allows multiple people to work on one project without modifying the main version. So you'll have a version, say it's a live website, what have you. You're not going to make your changes or your updates to a live website. You're obviously going to make a copy of that live website. You're going to make whatever changes that you need to make to it, for example, and then you'll make the version of the website you've got that will now, going forwards, become your new live website. So Git is a way of managing that, but it's more than that as well, as we'll come onto it. Another fantastic element about Git is that it is open source, so it is constantly developing all the time, and it can be worked on by people all over the world, and it's completely free. So it's fantastic. Another thing that's great about it is that Git is a distributed system. So what that means is that anyone who is working on a Git project will have the entire history of the Git development process on their computer. So say you've got the master server in your office, that's got the main project on it. If you then use Git to bring it over to your system, you'll effectively be cloning everything that's on that master version. You'll then make the changes you need to make. You'll then send that back to the master server, which will have the project on it. And then in the future, say someone else, say your colleague then decides to work on the project or needs to work on the project, they'll then clone the whole, what's called repository, and they'll have the full version and any changes that you've made and any changes that have been made before you on this. So it's really powerful. So it's, it's almost a little bit of insurance that any errors, anything like that, you can always reset back to an earlier point and work out what you can change. So an important point to note as well is that Git is not GitHub. You will have probably heard, if you've heard of Git, you've probably heard of GitHub. In fact, you might have heard of GitHub before you heard of Git. So Git is the process of version control. Git is one of many version controls, but Git is the predominant one. And GitHub is a online service. There's also desktop versions of the app as well that basically utilizes Git in a friendly manner. There are all sorts of other online versions equivalent to GitHub. GitHub is the one that we're going to focus on throughout this series. So going forward with that, a bit more about Git. These are some terms, some of which I've already used already. These are some important terms. They will make a lot more sense as we're going through the tutorials, but these are the main ones that I want to draw your attention to. So there's the master branch, basically it's the main project, and the repository is, again, very similarly related to that, but the repository is where the whole project is stored. Now we've talked about already when you need to effectively clone the main project so that you can work on it separately. So you call that forking the main project. So you would fork it over to your computer, make the changes that you would need to make. And then once your changes are ready to go, you would create what's called a pull, or a pull request, which is a request basically to merge your fork with another branch. Not necessarily yours, because you might have a development branch and then a sub-development branch, for example, but it's a request to then merge the changes that you've made back to another branch. So say, make the changes or the patch you've done back onto the main project. And along the way, as we'll see in a second, there are also commits. Commits are basically save changes. So you've already forked a repository and you're starting to work through and make your changes on the project. As you go along and make those changes, you'll make tiny little commits along the way, and that's effectively just saving your changes to the fork or the branch that you're working on. Okay, so what does a Git workflow look like? So generally, and this is a very simplified version, this would be what you'd see if you were working with Git on your own. So you see across the top, you've got the main horizontal arrow. That is your master branch, your main project. This is what your project is along here. And each of these little orange circles, they represent your commits. So it goes back that way ad infinitum and goes on there into the future. So there's been a little bit of a commit here, say, maybe it was a previous thing, or maybe it's the initial creation of the project. And so say this is your live project, say this is a live website, for example. What does the end user see? Well, the end user can only see things on this line. This is what your domain name, for example, will point at. This is what they can see. So maybe this is the launch of the first website. Initially, maybe it's a coming soon page with a bit of a just basic company information. Then you might add some features, like you might then want to add a product catalog. Later on, you might then decide to add a brochure, the full e-commerce setup, sorry. And then further along, there might just be a little quick patch that you need to make. And I think this is quite a nice visual way of demonstrating how the Git workflow is. So you can see that's the main project, and these are the commits. This is what the end user can see. So each time of this is the project changing potentially how it is viewed. And at this point here, where the branch comes off to one side, this is where a user, yourself, has initiated a fork of the main branch. And this is now another branch that will run along simultaneously alongside the master branch until a pull request is made to send it back to it. It might be that it never actually ends up back on the main branch. It might be that either the project is scrapped or it becomes another project entirely. But, you know, assuming that this is a general project and you're just adding an extra feature, for example, to the website, so you'll fork it, and then this will be your development branch. So you'll make some changes, you'll make a few more changes, and then you'll put the make a pull request, and it'll go back and update the main branch, so it'll update the project. Then, as we said, potentially you want to add some e-commerce capabilities to your website, anything like that. So again, the customer is only between here and here, only going to be able to see, for example, just your product catalog. No opportunity to be able to buy anything on the website. But what you're working on alongside this, all while this is still visible to the end user, is you are adding e-commerce capabilities. Maybe you're setting up the databases here. Maybe you're adding some extra security. Here is the final little bit. Maybe you're adding a shopping cart, whatever. And when it's already good to go, you've already done your testing. Pull request back to the master branch, and then all of a sudden on this one here, the end user is now able to go, oh, e-commerce is available on the website. Couple of other little commits, maybe there are other side projects that have gone along, maybe there's a little spelling mistake or a little quick patch that you need to make, so you've quickly forked it and sent it back to the master branch. So this is the general idea of what the workflow looks like. So this is the master branch, this is effectively the main project, this is the live project, and these are tiny little side projects. Just tiny little side projects where you're tweaking, modifying, upgrading perhaps the project. Now, as I said, this is what it would look like if you were doing it on your own. In reality, it's probably going to look like this. Generally, you would work in teams on a project. So say, for example, this is your development branch and you've forked it there and you are making some changes. Now, you notice at the same time, one of your colleagues has also forked it at exactly the same time as you, and they're making some changes as well. But it might be that they're working on a completely different section of the project, so it doesn't really matter that you're both working on it at the same time, because what you're changing here really doesn't affect what they're changing here, and what they're changing here doesn't affect you, so it doesn't matter that you've both forked at exactly the same time. So there are two additional versions of this master branch. You're making the changes that you need to make, and when you're ready to go, you make your pull request, and it goes back up to the master branch. Fine. But your colleague who's doing this one, they're doing something else, and say it's a touch more substantial, whatever. And when they've reached this point here, they're aware through just conversations in the office that this commit that's been made here is something that might actually affect or impact the changes that they're making. And there's been a change made to the master branch here that potentially is going to affect their project. So what they can actually do is update their project. So they don't need to fork the master branch again, but what they can do is look at the master branch and update and compare between their branch and the master branch, and any changes that have been made to the master branch that need updating and pulling across, they can then at that point have a look at it, see whether they need, and then update this so that this now reflects the master branch again. And then these final little bits are just the final patches that they need to make to their project, and then another pull request and up to the master branch. Similarly, another project alongside here, and they've started working on this because it was mission critical. For example, they really needed to get it started, even though they knew that this person was working on this project, and as soon as this project is completed and live, they've updated their system. So they've updated it, it's ready to go. They just needed to wait for this project to be finished. So as soon as this project was finished and updated to the master branch, they've been able to pull it down to theirs, final tweaks, and they've also sent that back to the master branch. So yep, 3 different people working on 3 very different updates to the project, but they've been all able to do it without changing the experience for the end user, because the end user, again, is only seeing what we've got on this top master branch. So that's the only project that's available to the outside viewer. So, I said earlier that Git isn't GitHub. So what is GitHub? We briefly touched upon it. It's this is an example of the online version of GitHub. There is a desktop version, which we'll come on to in the next episode. But what you can see here, it's just a little hub, effectively. And this is an example of a repository. So there's my account there, and then a repository name, once an hour. And within there, you can see there's a bunch of files and things within there. You can see that there have been 14 commits to this over the life of the period. We're within the master branch, you can see there. But we'll come on to this. But it's basically a visual way of showing you file systems. But GitHub, with it being online, it's a great way of working within the cloud. And GitHub, again, as with Git, it's open source, it's free to use, and it's a great way of sharing your projects with the wider world in general, outside of your team. So it's great to work on little projects on your own. But this will all make sense as we come on in the next episode. So next time, obviously we've talked a lot about what Git is, what Git isn't, and we've obviously mentioned GitHub a lot. So next time we're going to look at getting started with this. We're going to look at installing Git on your computer and getting started with GitHub as well. So otherwise, that is everything for me. If you have enjoyed it, please do leave a like. If you want to keep up to date with this series and more tutorials coming soon, please do subscribe to the channel as well. It'd be really helpful. And if you've got any questions, any comments, any feedback, please do leave them in the comments below. Please be reasonable about it. We are all adults, but I'll try and respond to every message that I get. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next episode.